Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about our friends the Sega Dreamcast and the Neo Geo, I guess we'll say the CD, the AES, and even the consolized MVS, all in one go. Specifically, we're going to be using devices that allow you to pair Bluetooth controllers with those consoles. Sounds pretty cool, right? Before we do that, though, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, as well as check out all my social media stuff in the description. I've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, my Spreadshirt, travel channel. I appreciate the support on all those platforms. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get started here. So yeah, we're going to be talking about a couple of little dongles that you install in these consoles to basically use modern day Bluetooth controllers on, frankly, legacy retro hardware. Now, full disclosure on this, these were sent to me for free for the purposes of review by StoneAgeGamer.com, and they did appear on a previous episode of Playload where you guys saw me unbox them and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so full shout out to them because they didn't have to do that, but they did it anyway, and now we can talk all about it. So if you like these or anything else that they sell, there's a link in the description. Go nuts. In fact, that link is also useful because that's also going to go over firmware updates and that kind of thing, and we'll get into that in a second. Now, keep in mind that these two devices, one is called the RetroTime DC adapter. This is by 8-Bit Mods. And then the other one is the Neo BT by Humble Bazooka. These are two separate companies, but basically these devices perform a similar function. Humble Bazooka, we actually did the same type of thing for the PCFX adapter that Humble Bazooka made. So if you're like one of the 4 people out there with a PCFX and you want to use a Bluetooth controller, there's actually a solution for you, and I've even done a video on it. But if you are more likely to have something like the Dreamcast or Neo Geo hardware, this one will be a little bit more your speed. So these two devices, even though they're made by separate companies, they actually function very similarly in not only concept, but actually in execution, like updates. So we're going to talk about the Dreamcast first because of the two, that was the more complicated one. And I mean that in a good way, but frankly, there's a little bit more to say about it because it took extra steps. Let's put it that way. So the Dreamcast, it has the dongle, you plug it in order to sync the controller, that part's comically easy. Like, you turn on the power, make sure you, of course, plug the dongle in first, because in the case of the Dreamcast, by plugging controller in after the power's on, you actually risk popping a fuse on the board, which renders the controllers non-functional. That's a problem that goes all the way back to the launch of the system. Never plug it in a controller on the Dreamcast after the system is on. But so that would apply here. Once you do that, and we'll go over this in a little bit later, but basically you would just take your controller that's Bluetooth. In this case, I'm going to be using a Nintendo Switch Pro controller just for testing purposes, but this would work with, hypothetically, a whole, a ton of different Bluetooth controllers, whether it's like Switch, or not only Switch ones, but like PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X, that type of thing. But then 8-Bit Do makes a bunch of Bluetooth controllers and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of different options, but again, for our purposes, I'm just narrowing it to the Switch Pro controller. So once the system is on, the device will light up, and it's basically going into a pairing mode. So it's essentially just kind of blinking. And then in the case of the Switch Pro controller, you would just hold down the sync button. You never actually touch the dongle on the device. You don't need to. The Switch Pro controller will just blink around, and then it'll find it, and that's it. You are up and running. Now, a little confusing message with the Dreamcast is the instructions say that if the light turns off, that means the controller synced correctly and you're good to go. It says that if its light remains on, then it couldn't sync to the controller. However, I found the opposite to be true. If the power went off, it indicated that the controller wouldn't connect, and if the light was on, it seemed to be working just fine. Now, that's just my experience. Maybe it's a typo in there. Maybe I'm not understanding something. I don't know, but either way, that was just my experience. Anyway, point is, I got that part to work fine. The issue I had is they recognized a problem with the Dreamcast in particular, which is, of course, that the save files would, your memory card, your VMU, would obviously normally function through the controller, and they didn't know initially what to do to handle that. So they found a solution, which was to basically build memory into the device so that you could basically save your games to it. That makes sense. What they decided to do, though, however, is by default have that disabled. So the Dreamcast thinks of whatever controller you've connected to it as just being a controller, of Dreamcast controller with no VMUs inserted. That's what it thinks. Now the goal is to change that. You want to be able to enable the memory functionality. Now, I don't 100% know why they left that as the default, but what I think happened is that By reading through some of their documentation, I noticed that they consider the rumble feature to be experimental, so they have that disabled as well. So you can go into the settings and enable both, and I think that's why they disabled it. Now let me talk you through how to connect to it to do that, because this was kind of a pain and wasn't really well documented in my experience. So in order to connect to the device, meaning to update it, to change settings, what have you, you have to turn the Dreamcast on within range of a computer or an Android device that's Bluetooth compatible. Now, this is worth noting. I updated this and accessed it via a Windows 10 based PC. However, you can technically use your phone and anything using Android. Using Windows is recommended as it goes a lot faster. I didn't go through the process of updating it via Android, so I can't talk you through those steps, but it is technically possible. And the only reason I really mention that, other than I guess, hey, it's an option, is that I guess with PCs, it's not always standard to have Bluetooth tech in them. So if you are the person that doesn't happen to have Bluetooth tech in your PC, then that's where you might need to update it with your phone. But that said, my rig does in fact have Bluetooth tech in it, so I didn't have that problem. Now, that said, you fire up the Dreamcast within range of your PC. There is a specific link, and I'll provide it in the description of this video, that you use for the Dreamcast. You click on it, and it's basically, I forget the name of the software. This was my first time ever seeing it, but it's basically something that just kind of runs through your web browser. Now, you have to have a web browser that is compatible with, like, I guess what they would call experimental tech. So I tried launching this through Firefox, and I couldn't get it to work. It basically said somewhere that it wouldn't allow me to do that because I had experimental settings disabled, or experimental Bluetooth settings disabled. However, I didn't have that problem in Chrome. Now, what I'm sure Firefox could actually support it. There's probably a setting somewhere that I'd have to uncheck or whatever. I just didn't do that. Chrome by default didn't have any issues, so I just went with that. So once I had Chrome up and I had that page running, you click on one of the settings like config or something like that, advanced config, and then you go in there and then it'll be like, okay, let's connect to your Dreamcast. And you press this other button and a little window will pop up that's looking for a pairing screen. So it's like searching for Bluetooth options, and then the Dreamcast dongle pops up. You click on that, you hit pair, it confirms, and then it takes a second as it like reads through the whole device, and then it just like lists out a whole bunch of options. Now in that subset of options, there's a whole lot going on, a lot of which we're not going to mess around with. But in there, it's technically possible to reconfigure this thing with custom button mapping. It's also possible to reconfigure the Dreamcast from thinking instead of that being a controller, it's an arcade stick or a racing wheel or something to that effect, depending on how particularly customized you want to make it. I didn't mess with any of that. The only setting I cared about was the VMU, or the memory card functionality. So if you scroll down slightly, and I'll put screenshots up here, there was one specifically about changing it. So it's under like gamepad, and then next to that, there was a setting about the memory card functionality, or accessories, excuse me. And on that, in that drop-down menu, there was a few options. There was like none, then there was memory card or VMU, something to that effect, and then there was Rumble, and then there was both. Now this subset menu is where you enable the VMU support, or the Rumble support, or both. I personally set it to both, and then once I've done that, I hit save, and then like a little red message came up that basically said I had to power cycle to update it. That's it. Once I did that, the Dreamcast suddenly detected that that was in fact a VMU. However, and this is important, by default, the Dreamcast can't actually use it. It considers it an unformatted VMU. So you have to open up the Dreamcast, turn it on, and then in there you go to the memory card settings, and you'll see this VMU that looks a little wonky, and it basically is just saying it needs to be formatted. So you click it, you tell it to format, and then after a minute, you have the 200 blocks VMU standard all over again. And then you can use that to save to. Now there's a couple other bonus features with that, because once you have that done, you can actually reconnect it to your PC at any time if you want to. And from there, you can actually upload the save that you have on there, like the 200 block file can be uploaded to your computer, and then from in there you can access it with like, you know, VMU tools and that kind of thing if you want to make changes, or if you want to build a new VMU file, you can send it back to there and then have all the saves already up on your Dreamcast. Like there's a lot of potential there. Point is that functionality does exist. I didn't really use it much, but it's there. And then you can also set it, of course, like I said, you do both, so you can have Rumble functionality, but that's the other thing. The Rumble functionality is in its infancy. It does require a firmware update, most likely in the future. future to get it more stabilized. And of course, the controller you're using it with, such as the Switch Pro controller, has to actually support Rumble. This one does, so all good in that department. But yeah, that was pretty much everything I had to experience with the Dreamcast version of this. I would have gone ahead and did a firmware update for it, but it shipped with the latest firmware, so there was really nothing else to do there. Just keep in mind that, yeah, there's a lot of customization potential in that, and I think that's very cool, and a lot of that seems very overwhelming. By default, I would have told them, like, hey man, at least have the memory card functional, but I guess maybe they were betting that if you had the VMU functionality already on, you'd be less likely to ever want to try and configure it and update it and add Rumble support. I don't really know what their thinking was on that. Maybe there's other trade-offs I'm unaware of. But regardless, you can enable it, and then that's good to go. But if you ever want the actual VMU screen, obviously that isn't going to work, so you would have to have one plugged in a different memory card slot, etc. So just keep in mind, if you know the Dreamcast, you can kind of figure out what the plus and minus of that whole thing is. But from a functionality standpoint, it was very solid, so I'm going to go ahead and show it to you. And it should pop up here on the screen. There you go. And so this right now, the last time this controller was used, it was synced to the Dreamcast, so all I did was hit A to turn the Switch controller on, and that was it. We're off and running. And as you can see here, works immediately. This is my Dreamcast that has the HDMI mod and has the mode in it, so this is like my beefy one. As I said, I didn't have to pair it this time, but if I had wanted to, all I would have done was hit the sync button or hold the sync button. In this case, because it was the last controller that was paired, was to that, all I do is hit A, that's it. It's that simple. And then you can see I've got all the games and whatever. There's really nothing else to show here, but the point is it does work. So yeah, you can use a Switch controller on a Dreamcast now. So that's all good to go. So now we'll switch over to the Neo BT again by Humble Bazooka. This one did not have any sort of like special features that required me to dig excessively into basically the PC to try and update anything. But it did require well, it didn't require a firmware update. It had the option for it. So that one was pretty simple. Same basic process. You just turn this on within range of your computer. You run that same program. It's not even a program. It's something it's like a website you can run within a browser. And then you pair it all up, and then there are separate files you can download. All this is freeware. This is all written out in detail on Stone Age Gamer's website, so you don't have to like remember the way I said it or anything. You can just follow the instructions. You grab a certain file, you throw it in there, it updates. It takes a few minutes. That's it. Power cycle, it's updated. So there's really not much else to say about it. Apparently the sirens outside, they really don't like me updating files. Thanks, guys. But I'm going to do it anyway. So we're going to fire this up here. In this case, we don't have much of a change to it, but we're going to go down to YPBPR because it's running through component, the Neo Geo CD. Now, the controller is no longer synced to this, so we have to do that in real time. So in order to do that, as I said, we're just going to hold down the sync button on the Switch controller, and then it starts doing its thing. And then it will, after just a moment, it will find there it goes, and it's paired. So now we have to wait, of course, for the Neo Geo load times, which are famous. And I'll get off that menu there so that doesn't bother us. But yeah, that's going to go. The Neo BT, the only real thing to say about it, other than the fact that you probably should firmware update it when you get it, is the compatibility. It works on the Neo Geo CDZ, as you can see. It works on the CD top loader. It works on the CD front loader. It works on the AES. And it works even on, like, that's the Bahar Bros consolized MVS. It works fine on all of them. So I go ahead and press start. And as you can see, that's all working fine. This is NOM 1975. Very good game, by the way. I can't play from this angle, but yeah, you get it. But as you can see, no problem. Works just fine. Yeah, it's a great game. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off for lighting reasons. But yeah, that's kind of really all there is to say. The Neo BT was the easier of the two as far as like setup because it really didn't require much of anything. And as you can see, even like from behind a screen in the middle of filming a video, I could easily reconnect from one to the other. It's not a big deal. So yeah, I think that it has the same potential too, by the way. You can go in there and make customizations to like button mapping. I didn't do any of this, okay? I didn't do any of this, but you can, like in this case, it functioned with the D-pad, the thumbstick did nothing. You could remap to the thumbstick. I just didn't do that. So these are all options out there. I just didn't mess with any of it, but there's a lot of potential for that. It also happens to work with the 8BitDo Neo Geo AES controllers. So So those ones, I think, they were Bluetooth based for like you know, other machines, but they do technically work with this device, meaning you could ironically use them back on original, you know, Neo Geo hardware. So I think that that's pretty neat. But yeah, that's really all there is to say. I think that they are pretty good. I also think if you are interested in Bluetooth controllers, you kind of already know what you're getting into here. Just the point is they do work pretty well as receivers, and the community, at least the guys who are making them, do seem to be on top of continuing to update. I'm more intrigued as to what future updates might come out of the Dreamcast, but that's largely because it's my favorite system, and because I want to see if they get that rumble thing ever worked out completely. I guess I'm not as interested in seeing the Neo BT, only because I think it's already exactly what it needs to be. I don't really think there's any other changes that are needed. Whereas I think there's still some room for improvement on the Dreamcast one, but that's just me. Anyway. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. There again is a link in the description to Stone Age Gamer. So again, shout out to them and thanks for that. So yeah, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, Twitter as well, I guess. I appreciate the support again. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.